Good morning students, Bindu Chaudhary is with you in our chapter reading session of our past third, and today we are covering chapter 7th. The name of the chapter is Civilizing the Native, Educating the Nation. This is the important theme because this one is the necessity of the time. So today we are covering its part first, and that's the main reason why we are here, because everything we are pursuing to you here. See, the starting in the earlier chapters, you have seen how British rule affected Rajas, Nawabs, peasants and tribal people. We had discussed everything in our previous chapters about these Rajas, these Nawabs, their positions. Some of them declined on that time, some of them was thrown up from them, some was captured by the British officials. So what happened to the students on that time? What happens to children on that time? In this chapter, we will try to understand what implications it had for the lives of the students, because this one is the great demand on that time and this time both. So here we are covering the impact on students. For the British in India wanted not only territorial conquest and control over revenues. We had already discussed this. British came here only for the purpose of the trade in our chapter 2nd, but later on what happened, they found some of the problems, facing the problems for the purpose of the expansion of the trade. That's why they wanted to capture the territory parts of India. So here territorial parts also conquest by them only for the purpose of revenues, only for the purpose of the laborers, only for the purpose of the development of their trade. They also felt that they had a cultural mission. They had to civilize the natives, change their customs and values. So this issue also rose in their minds, that they had the cultural mission to develop the civilized people, to develop the tendency of the civilization of the natives. So lot of change occurred in our customs and values. Now everything changed here in our India also at present. When we are talking about students, lot of changes takes place in our day-to-day life. First of all, we are not in a position to regularize all these things, but later on what happened, we are also habitual of these things. On that time, what type of changes were to be introduced, we will discuss here. How were Indians to be educated, civilized and made into what the British believed were good subjects. The main reason why they wanted to civilize the Indians. See here, they wanted Indians to be educated, to be civilized and to be believed were in a very good subjects. Many circumstances came here. We will discuss in this chapter one by one. First of all, how the British saw education in India. Let us look at what the British thought and did, and how some of the ideas of education that we are now take for granted evolved in last 200 years. इस चैप्टर में हम इसी चीज़ का डिस्कशन करेंगे बच्चों, कि कैसे पिछले 200 सालों में जो ब्रिटिश लोग हैं उनका जो विचार हैं और जो उन्होंने काम किए फॉर द पर्पज़ ऑफ द आइडियाज़ ऑफ एजुकेशन, फॉर द पर्पज़ ऑफ द ग्रांटेड evolved. So here we are discussing, in the process of this inquiry we will also see how Indian reacted to British ideas of education and how they developed their own views about how Indians were to be educated. Two phenomena were there on that time. First phenomena of the British ideas and the second phenomena of Indian ideas. See here in this chapter how Indian reacts to the British ideas of education to students, and how our Indians developed their own views, and how Indians were to be educated on that time. The tradition of Orientalism started on that time. In the year 1783, a person named William Jones arrived in Calcutta. 1783 में विलियम जॉन्स जब कलकत्ता आए थे, आफ्टर दैट लॉट ऑफ चेंजेस टुक प्लेस. He had an appointment as a junior judge at the Supreme Court that the company had to set up. Company wanted to set up a new Supreme Court here in Calcutta. That's why he had an appointment for the post of the junior judge in that Supreme Court. See this one, William Jones learning Persian. This fellow not only learned Persian, he knew very much languages. Not only Persian, every languages. See here, in addition to being an expert in law, जॉन्स वॉज इन लिंग्विस्टिक. बहुत अच्छे लिंग्विस्टिक भी थे ये. कैसे थे बच्चों, क्या क्या इन्होंने लिंग्विस्टिक में काम किया? सी हेयर, ही हैड स्टडीड ग्रीक and Latin at Oxford, knew French and English, had picked up Arabic from a friend and had also learnt Persian. See the languages he knew. See the languages of Jones. First of all Greek, then Latin, then French, and after that English, Arabic from his friend, and later on Persian. So he was a great linguistic. See, at Calcutta he began spending many hours a day with pandits who taught him the subtleties of Sanskrit languages, grammar and poetry. So after Persian languages, he started lot of sittings with the local pandits of Calcutta, and local pandits of Calcutta taught him the subtleties of Sanskrit languages. So their grammar, their poetry, everything he had discussed with them. See, the fellow was so much intelligent. Englishmen like Henry Thomas. We had already discussed about Jones. Then this one is here. Englishmen like Henry Thomas, Colebrook and Nathaniel Hall were also busy discovering the ancient Indian heritage, mastering Indian languages and translating Sanskrit and Persian works into English. This one is the great adventure for these people, because in Indian material, because in Indian Sanskrit subject, because in our Persian, and because in our Indian culture, in Hindi, we had lot of things, and these people, Henry Thomas, Colebrook and Nathaniel, they wanted to discuss all these material, and they wanted to capture all these things in discovering about our Indian heritage of that time. Together with them, Jones set up, वो तो कर ही रहे थे, Jones also set up with them the Asiatic Society of Bengal. First society was developed in Bengal and started a journal called Asiatic Researches. So this main journal was started on that time. Jones and Colebrook went about discovering ancient texts, understanding their meaning, translating them and making their findings known to others. These people was very much intelligent. Why? Because not only they are grasping their knowledge to themselves, these people were not only intelligent, but they also wanted to translate these things, and finally they wanted to pursue everything in front of all the peoples, because they are translating everything. This project they believed would not only help the British learn from Indian culture, but it would also help Indian rediscover their own heritage and understand the lost glories of their past, because everything was in their hand. Indians also wanted to persuade that thing. Indian also wanted to know about the glorious movements of their past. So these people helped a lot, not only to themselves but also to the Indian peoples of that time. In this process, the British would become the guardians of Indian culture as well as its masters. So for this purpose, let's recall the Britishers for the guardians, as the guardians of the Indian culture as well as our masters, because they not only translated tribal verses, they not only translated Sanskrit and Hindi and other customs and traditions of our Indians, they need to write that in a printing form also. With this object in view, a madrasa was set up in Calcutta. इसी पर्पज से, इसी ऑब्जेक्ट को ध्यान में रखते हुए मदरसा का सेटअप किया गया बच्चों कैलकाटा के अंदर इन द ईयर 1781. एक एक आप ईयर को देखिए. वी आर डिस्कसिंग हेयर द ईयर्स इंसिडेंट्स occurred on that time and what type of incident occurs we are covering that one also. Madrasa was set up in Calcutta in the year 1781 to promote the study of Arabic, Persian and Islamic laws. Why madrasas was set up on that time? For the study of the Arabic, for the study of the Persian and for the study of the Islamic laws. And the Hindu college was also established in Banaras in 1791. See, madrasas as well as Hindu colleges were established on that time for the encouragement of the study of ancient Sanskrit texts that would be useful for the administration of the country. Why Hindu college in Banaras was established? Because for the purpose of the ancient Sanskrit texts, how the kings or Nawabs or Rajas ruled on that time, that were all in the Sanskrit text. So these people wanted to encourage this one, and this one is also helpful for them for the administration of the country as India. Okay, see here, grave errors of the East. क्या क्या थी देखिए आप, क्या हुआ वहाँ पे. From the early 19th century, many British officials began to criticize the Orientalist vision of learning. अब यहाँ पे changes आ रहे हैं बच्चों. हो क्या रहा है? Many British officials wanted to criticize. They began to criticize why all these things were going on. Why the translation, why the summing up of all the heritages, the important material, the important Sanskrit text were there. Why these Indian persuaded for the learning of the Hindus material as well as Islamic laws, Persian and Arabic languages. So the reason behind it, they said that knowledge of the East was full of errors and unscientific thoughts. Eastern language, Eastern literature was non-serious and light-hearted. The main reason to criticize for the orientation was that they thought that the language or the knowledge of the East was full of errors. We had many errors and we had no scientific proofs for all these things. We have no scientific thoughts for the materials we are using. So they thought that Eastern literature was not serious and they took it in a light-hearted mode. So they argued that it was wrong on the part of the British to spend so much efforts encouraging the study of Arabic as well as Sanskrit language and literature. So many of the Britishers refused and they criticized this thing, that why the use of Arabic and why the use of Sanskrit language and their translations were going on. So all these things needs some of the effort, some of the money, some of the timing. So many of the officials refused and they began to criticize this thing. By the 1830s, the attack on the Orientalists became very sharper. धीरे धीरे जो विरोधी थे वो बहुत ज़्यादा हावी होते जा रहे थे. One of the most outspoken and influential of such critics of the time was Thomas Babington Macaulay. हम मैकॉले की पद्धति जानते हैं. हम में से या हमारे जो फादर्स हैं वो कहते भी हैं. मैकाले ने कौन सी पद्धति घोषित की थी बच्चों? मैकाले का पूरा नाम है थॉमस बेबिंगटन मैकॉले. वी विल रीड हेयर एंड डिस्कस दैट पॉलिसी आल्सो. He saw India as an uncivilized country that needed to be civilized. As per Macaulay, Macaulay thought that Indians were so much uncivilized and we are only here for the civilized to the Indian peoples. No branch of Eastern knowledge, according to him, could be compared to what England had produced, and this one is the main reason why he refused for the Arabic and Sanskrit languages, because he thought that the Eastern language was no branch. As to him, he compared everything Eastern language to the England ones, to the English ones. So he protested the use of Sanskrit and Arabic and other languages in behalf of the English one. He preferred English language here also. Who could deny? Declared Macaulay that a single shelf of a good European library was worth the whole native literature of India and Arabia, and he criticized and said that as European libraries was full of knowledge, so there is not a single knowledge, as per Macaulay, there is not a single knowledge of the literature of India and Arabia. He urged that the British government in India stop wasting public money in promoting orientation or oriental learning, for it was of no practical use. See here the mentality of Macaulay. Macaulay always refused, and he gave his views on this one, that this one is the wasting of the public money for the orientation of the languages, different languages. So with great energy and passion, Macaulay emphasized the need to teach the English language. Here is the answer of all these things. Macaulay wanted only English language to be used in practice to the Indian people. Here is the answer. क्यों उन्होंने ऐसा कहा था बच्चों? क्योंकि उनको क्लर्क पैदा करने थे. उनको ऐसे क्लर्क चाहिए थे जो कि ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी को, जो कि ब्रिटिश रूलर्स को यहाँ पे उनकी हेल्प कर सके. दैट्स वाई ही रिफ्यूज्ड संस्कृत लैंग्वेज, हिंदी लैंग्वेज, अरबिक लैंग्वेज, इस्लामिक लैंग्वेज, एंड ही परsuaded that only and only English language is needed to teach to the Indian people. He felt that knowledge of English would allow Indians to read some of the finest literature the world had produced. It would make them aware of the developments in the Western science and technology and philosophies. Another reason for the reading purpose of the English, for the starting purpose of the English language, was that he allowed Indians for the finest literature portion of the world. If Indian peoples were in a position to read and write in English, then they were in a position for the finest literature reading all over the world, and they also aware for the developments in the Western science and philosophies. What happened to our world? Indian people also recognize that things only by reading English, only by writing English. So, teaching of English could thus be a way of civilizing people. Here, Macaulay's point of view was discussed here. So, he had a view that only English is the language who civilized the Indian people. changing their taste, values and culture. So he had some other concepts of the Oriental languages. He refused for the Oriental languages. He thought that this one is the wasting of the time and wasting of the public's material or money. So following Macaulay's Minute, the English Education Act of 1835 was introduced. और ये जो एजुकेशन एक्ट है, इस एक्ट को मैकाले मिनट भी कहा जाता है बच्चों. और 1835 में हम क्या देखते हैं, इंग्लिश एजुकेशन एक्ट 1835 शुरू हो चुका था. The decision was to make English the medium of instruction for the higher education and to stop the promotion of Oriental institutions like the Calcutta, Madrasa and Banaras Sanskrit colleges. See the material or see the purpose of the starting of the 1835 Act or Macaulay Minutes Act. The main reason is to teach them English in the medium as and to teach them for the higher education purpose. Not only Sanskrit was there, not only Islam was there, not only these madrasas was there. He refused all these things. He needed only and only English language to be taught for the medium instruction for higher education, and he stopped the promotion of the institutes like Calcutta, Banaras and the Banaras Sanskrit colleges. He refused to give money to them. He refused for the encouragement for the development of these madrasas of Calcutta and these Banaras Sanskrit colleges. He only needed the promotion of English in ourselves. So these institutions were seen as temples of darkness that were falling themselves into decay. और मेकाले की अगर हम मानते हैं बच्चों, तो मेकाले ने तो इतना तक कह दिया था कि हमारे ये जो मदरसेज हैं, हमारे ये जो संस्कृत कॉलेजेस हैं, ये सब क्या हैं, दीज आर द temples of darknesses that were falling themselves into the decay portions. So English textbooks now begin to be produced for schools. धीरे धीरे हम क्या देखते हैं, स्कूलों में आप अभी इंग्लिश पढ़ रहे हैं बच्चों. बट व्हाट हैपन्स व्हेन वी आर अंडर द ब्रिटिश कॉन्क्वेस्ट. सी हाउ द सिस्टम डेवलप्ड इन द 1835 न्यू मैकाले मिनट एक्ट was imposed to all of us, and English textbooks began to be regularized for the purpose of the schools. So here is the portion how English came into existence in our Indian schools. Indian people have learned the English, and how Macaulay's Minutes, how Macaulay's 1835 Act was imposed in all of us, and how at present India, it's okay, we are feeling proud in speaking English, but as well as we are feeling very good proud in speaking Hindi also. But when we are talking about the previous ones, then how English came into existence in our schools, this one is the system. Let's read our remaining portion in the next part. Stay with us. Have a nice day.